If there's one thing that the government knows how to do, it's how to make things worse while pretending to make them better. And that is what the new vehicle efficiency standards, also known as the Ute Tax, are definitely going to do. Now, I don't normally do the whole watch to the end thing, that whole, you won't believe the last one shtick. It's just not really my style. But for this video, I'm going to make an exception. Because the deeper down this rabbit hole we go, the crazier it gets. And I'm going to sum it up for you right now by saying that these new vehicle efficiency standards are built on a lie. They will backfire spectacularly. You will end up paying way more to get way less, and it's all propped up and indeed protected by a mafia-style standover tactic that should make your blood boil. This really is one of those rare watch it to the end type videos. You ready? Here we go. This new Ute tax is about as insane as bureaucrats can get, and I don't care how much you think you already know about it. I promise you, it's crazier than you think, and you're going to want to buckle your seatbelt and keep your arms and legs inside the vehicle, because this is a ride. The objective of this new tax, if you believe the marketing guff, is to save us all from death by CO2. Because apparently CO2 is going to strangle us in our sleep or something. I'm not quite clear on the details, but don't worry, the government are here to help. Because that's never backfired before. Oh wait, hang on. Now I remember, when they tried pretty much exactly the same thing in America, it 100% backfired and has been the primary driving force, pun fully intended, behind the supersizing of the American vehicle fleet. More on that later. And our regulators, they're not just repeating the mistakes of the EPA in the past. Oh no, these guys are good. They've figured out new and improved ways to completely fuck it up. My name's Topher Field, this is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to see through the spin and to make sense of the nonsense, so that no matter what comes your way, you can always think free. I am 100% viewer supported and I am 200% caffeine dependent. So please buy me a coffee via the button at topherfield.net. And if you don't have a copy of either of my two best-selling books about civil disobedience, that's Good People Break Bad Laws and Good Christians Break Bad Laws, or copies of my DVDs or my t-shirts or my hoodies, then head over to goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com and grab yours now. In the process, you'll be helping me to keep pissing off stupid people with videos like this one. All right, these new vehicle efficiency standards are a perfect example of something that looks good on paper, but does not work in reality. The aim is to manipulate Australians into buying smaller cars with smaller engines and more hybrid or pure EV vehicles, all for the purpose of starving our planet of carbon dioxide, even though we're already dangerously low on the stuff, historically speaking. Our current atmospheric level of carbon dioxide is just 430 parts per million approximately, which is a fraction of what's historically been the norm. But never mind the facts. We're supposed to be scared of this invisible trace gas, and so all of us, and by us, I mean not the politicians or bureaucrats who drive taxpayer-funded cars, I mean all of us, we're going to have to spend more money in return for less car so that a bureaucrat can sleep at night because numbers on their spreadsheet are going in the right direction. As of a few days ago, every vehicle sold in Australia is logged, and specifically the tailpipe emissions, which is the grams per kilometre of CO2, is noted. Now, manufacturers have to ensure that in any 3-year period, the average of these tailpipe emissions for all of the cars they imported is below the target number. Now, the target number starts at 141 grams per kilometre travelled of CO2 emissions, but that number reduces very rapidly over just a few years down to just a few dozen grams per kilometre. Ultimately, they are trying to enforce a pure electric fleet by 2035, even though the official all-EV target has been dropped. Supporters of these efficiency standards love to claim that they will be a boon for motorists because cars will be cleaner and cheaper to run. But that's only because they're smaller and more expensive to buy. Take, for example, the Toyota Corolla, a cheap and cheerful starter car, right? You would think that this is exactly the sort of lightweight, small-engined car that these greeny do-gooders would love for us all to be driving. Thing is that Toyota as a brand also want to sell things like Land Cruisers and Hiluxes. So if they're going to limbo under that 141 grams per kilometre bar, then they're going to have to sell a lot of very low emissions cars at one end so that they can continue to sell the bigger, heavier, high emissions workhorses that make them so much money at the other end. So even the littlest of cars are now on a very expensive diet. Last year, in the lead up to the introduction of these efficiency standards, Toyota discontinued all of their pure internal combustion engined Toyota Corollas and Yaris's. Now you're left with only the very frugal and very expensive hybrid options. Remember when you could get a Toyota Corolla for $19,990 drive away? Well, Pepperidge Farm remembers. Now you're looking at well over $30,000 at a minimum once you add the on-road costs. And you can pay over $40,000 for a Toyota Corolla if you really wanted to. But to be fair, the Corolla is no longer the baby of the Toyota family. It's gotten bigger, and the new baby is the Toyota Yaris. So surely I should be looking at a Yaris, right? Well, the joke's on you, because once again, once you add on-road costs to the hybrid-only Yaris, you're still looking at over $30,000 for the base model after on-road costs. So when advocates of these efficiency standards crow about how they're saving motorists thousands of dollars over the life of a vehicle, feel free to remind them that that's only because they're adding thousands of dollars to the purchase price of the vehicle. But even if it's not cheaper, it will be cleaner, right? Well, the scheme incentivizes car manufacturers to try and get well under that 141 gram target by allowing them to sell credits to other car makers, the ones who are perhaps over their target. And companies like Tesla and BYD are sure to cash in because their cars, well, they don't even have a tailpipe, so their tailpipe emissions are zero. But weirdly, that doesn't mean that their CO2 emissions are zero. Because, well, I hate to break it to you, but EVs are only as low carbon dioxide as the electricity grid that you plug them into. And well, for those of you that are terrified of plant food, I have some bad news. Our electricity is not carbon neutral, and it's not going to be anytime soon. Yes, I know, rooftop solar and all those big batteries. Trouble is that despite the extraordinary amounts of money that we are spending and the environmental vandalism that are huge grid-scale battery systems, we are still nowhere near making it through even a single night without needing coal, gas, and at times even diesel generators. We're not even close to getting through one night, and we won't be anytime soon. And if more people start driving EVs, then demand for electricity at night will go up. And we'll have to burn even more coal, oil, and, diesel. Because, well, when are those EVs going to be charged? During the day? Well, yeah, a few. But even the most progressive companies only have a handful of charging ports available in the office car park powered by rooftop solar panels during the day. Most of these EVs will be charged at night when they're at home. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but solar panels really struggle at night. I mean, they really struggle. It's kind of their kryptonite, actually. So all of these EVs charging at night will be charging from coal, gas, and, diesel. Aren't you glad you bought that EV and not a dirty diesel car? But here's where it gets delicious. The average CO2 emissions per kilowatt hour produced in Australia is about 550 grams. Now, that's the average. It's important to remember that's the average. We're going to come back to that a little bit later on. Now, a Tesla Model Y four-wheel drive uses 16.9 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers traveled at freeway speeds. So, let's do the math. 16.9 kilowatt hours times 550 grams per kilowatt hour divided by 100 for the kilometers traveled gives you 93 grams of carbon dioxide emitted per kilometer traveled. Now, you remember I said the target as a fleet average under this new scheme is 141 grams per kilometer, yeah? Well, that's where it starts. And in just 4 years' time, 2029, the target will have reduced all the way down to just 58 grams per kilometre travelled, which means that even a modern-day Tesla Model Y is going to be emitting way more real-world carbon dioxide per kilometre than the average tailpipe carbon dioxide required under this scheme. But it gets even worse, because that Tesla Model Y is mostly going to recharge at night when there is no solar power. So the actual electricity being generated by our coal, gas, and diesel power plants, keeping the lights on overnight, will be the same electricity that's charging the car, which has higher CO2 emissions than the average does. Meaning that if we actually counted the real-world CO2 emissions of EVs properly, even pure electric vehicles will spectacularly fail these efficiency standards in just 4 years' time. But still, that's not actually the crazy part, because that 93 plus grams of CO2 per kilometre emissions from the grid that's recharging those EVs, those CO2 emissions are not counted at all in this scheme because they don't come out of the tailpipe. This scheme only measures tailpipe emissions. So in truth, this whole thing's built on a lie. And EV importers will get credits for being zero CO2. They'll actually get credits for emitting no CO2 at all, even though they are emitting plenty. It's just not coming out of the tailpipe. But here's the kicker. They can then take those credits that they're getting and sell those credits to other car makers who are over their CO2 targets, allowing those car makers to go even higher, potentially much higher than the 141 grams per kilometre, which means if you do the math, that EV cars are the mechanism by which our overall CO2 emissions can actually go up whilst appearing to go down. Every electric vehicle sold will allow the average real-world CO2 emissions of Australia's vehicle fleet to go up and not down under this scheme. It's not about actually accomplishing anything. It's about looking like you're doing something whilst actually not achieving anything at all, but costing Australians a fortune in the process. But believe it or not, I still haven't gotten to the worst of it. Because the US tried this back in the 1970s and it backfired spectacularly. See, if you're going to set a vehicle efficiency standard for certain kinds of vehicles, then you have to define which vehicles have to fall under that standard and which vehicles don't. And, well, you know how Americans really love their big trucks? Yeah, that's kind of the fault of the Environmental Protection Agency and their emissions standards, which applied to smaller vehicles and made them more expensive, but didn't apply to, big pickups. And you'd think that they would have learnt from this mistake, but actually 10 years ago, the EPA tried to fix their little whoopsie by updating the regulations and using a characteristics-based standard. And yeah, as a result, the trucks have gotten even bigger. And yeah, you'd think that given the Yanks had 2 goes at it and screwed it up both times, you would think that the Australian authorities might have given it a little bit more thought. But they haven't. See, if you're a hard-working tradie who has to carry a lot of tools, and I don't mean the boss and the new apprentice, I mean like physical hardware tools, and you're thinking about buying one of these, well, these are actually too small, and therefore the efficiency standards will apply to them, which means that depending on how many smaller vehicles that particular manufacturer has managed to sell that year and what their current fleet average grams of CO2 per kilometre are, they might have to slug you some extra cost just so they can cover the fine that they will have to pay for selling you this fuel-guzzling car that is captured under the scheme. So your options are, well, I mean, sure, you can stump up some extra cash for a glorified McHappy Meal toy like this one, or you could get a real truck, something so big that it's not counted under this harebrained scheme, something like, this Ram 3500 Laramie crew cab. Yes, really, the Toyota pickup is captured by the scheme, but this Ram is not. Now, I'm not a mind reader, but I bet I know which one you would choose. This is exactly the same mistake they made in America. And we're looking at them and we're being like, hey, that didn't work out for you, but how about we give it a go? Now, I don't mind a big car, but never before in my life have I ever looked at one of these things and thought, oh yes, I need that. But now, with this gobsmackingly stupid, intellect-insulting scheme in place, I'll spend the money to get that monstrosity just so I can stick my middle finger up at these petty, meddling, busybody do-gooders as I thunder past their pathetic, overpriced and overtaxed little ecomobiles. I'm the kind of guy that usually rolls my eyes when I see a video online of someone rolling coal on the internet. But just 3 days since the introduction of this new scheme, I'm not just ready to roll coal, I'm ready to steamroll over the top of any of their Priuses. But still, believe it or not, we haven't got to the worst of it. Because if you don't get under that 141 grams per kilometre target, then you as the car importer have to pay a fine. Now, your fine is either going to be $50 per gram kilometre or $100 per gram kilometre. Now, you might be wondering, why are there two different values of fine? Why a 50 and a 100? Well, because the $50 per gram kilometre is if you pay up when you get the fine without arguing. The second figure, the $100 per gram kilometre, that's what they'll charge you if you take them to court and lose. Now, stop for a second. This is extortion. This is the government attempting to bully people into not daring to challenge their scheme in court for fear of the punitive, purely arbitrary, additional punishment that they will receive at the hands of these petty, busybody bureaucrats if they dare to question my authority. All jokes aside, this should send a shiver down your spine. Forget challenging the fines in court. We need one of the car makers to challenge this clause in court, because there is no way that any government should be allowed to pull a stunt like this. If this isn't an example of them abusing their position of power to pervert the course of justice, then what is? All right, we've covered a lot. Let me sum up. Here we have a scheme that will cost you a lot of money, won't reduce emissions nearly as much as they say it will, if at all, once you factor in the electricity grid emissions, and it incentivizes us to supersize our vehicle fleet exactly like they did in the US, and it's backed by a mafia-style threat of extortion if you dare to challenge them. Sorry, am I in Soviet Russia right now? Since when did this become acceptable in Australia? The truth is, it's not acceptable. This concept is so badly thought through and so cack-handedly implemented that it should be an instant career ender for every bureaucrat who had a hand in it. But we know it won't be, because somehow in this country we've decided that we're okay with this kind of mediocrity, that we tolerate midwits with power passing off their kindergarten homework as policy. The problem here? It's us, and the fact that we are way too patient and way too tolerant with nonsense like this. Now, I wish I knew what the solution was. I don't. For the last 16 years, I've been trying to get people to realize just how far down the drain our country has gone. And it does seem like finally people are starting to sit up and pay attention, which is great. But things now are so much worse than they were when I started. And honestly, I'm not sure how we get out of this mess. For now, I'm just going to keep doing what I do, which is helping people like you to understand the mess, to make sense of the nonsense, and to make better decisions for yourself. Decisions like buying a Ram 3500 Laramie crew cab and rolling coal. And hey, while you're here, why not buy me a coffee so that maybe one day I can afford one of these too? My name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and, well, this is what I do. I dive into the issues that are affecting us all right now, and I help you to not only have information, but to have understanding. Because, in the end, my objective is to help all of us to think free in every way and all the time. I do this full time, and I'm 100% viewer supported. So if you've learnt something, if you've enjoyed this video, if you've had a chuckle, or you see value in me continuing to do my work, then please buy me a coffee via the button at topherfield.net and check out my books, my DVDs, and my merchandise from goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. Thank you so much for watching to the end. The algorithm loves you, and so do I. Please like, comment which CO2 spewing vehicle you'd like to buy, subscribe, and as always, think free.